Here is the leadership problem that no one names clearly enough. Most organizations are not short of data. They're not short of strategy. They are not even short of talent. They are short of the ability to make sense of what is actually happening fast enough, accurately enough, with enough internal alignment that can help them act before the window closes. The companies that are winning in this environment right now are not doing so because they have better AI tools and a fast decision pipeline. They are winning because they have built something that most organizations are still treating like a side project. They have built community. Not community as a feel good program, but community as the sensing and the response infrastructure of their entire organization. My guest today is the person who has built he has built some of the convincingly rigorous community. He has spent more than 2 decades inside organizations, and he has really spent time with some innovative companies, building and studying the networks through which organizations either adapt or fail behind. So he is the author of the community first advantage. He is the creator of Adapt Leadership Framework and one of the most, in my view, rigorous systems thinkers that I have encountered. I've encountered so many people, both in my professional life and on doing podcasts. He's one of the most rigorous ones who has actually talked on the question of organizational intelligence in the AI era. So, Chris, you are welcome to the Clarity Mandate podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, exciting. A great way to set it up there. Yeah, excited to be here and get into a really important topic that I think is going to be good for leaders to dive into. So thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Most leaders believe that they have a strategy problem or a talent problem. But you've spent over 20 years inside organizations that are arguing they are actually having a problem that they can't really perceive what is changing around them until it is too late. So, for me, when you talk about sensing problem, what breaks that sensing capacity? And what does it break quietly within the organization?
Yeah, a great question. I think a lot of it comes down to the perception of that word that you mentioned earlier, community. I think, there's a lot of leaders and almost all the leaders that I've talked to and, researched for the book and have worked with over the last 20 years. A lot of them all have a preconceived idea of what that word means. And some of them think that it is like a soft thing or something that is important, but you can't measure it. It's important, but there's no science behind it. Or it's important, but they can't see how it fits like the bottom line, right? Or like how it fits growth or cost savings and things like that, right? They haven't been introduced to how you can do that. So they push it off, right? But at the core, when I ask leaders about community and even deeper, like about the idea of the sense of belonging, they're like, well, yeah, actually, I have felt that. I felt that in my own life, in my own relationships, maybe at a concert, maybe in community activities that they do outside of work or when they were younger, whatever it is, right? But there's this gap of like taking that idea and that feeling that they had and then putting it into the business. And a lot of leaders don't have the guidance and the the instruction, I guess, to an examples to make that gap. So what happens that's happening is they run their organizations with knowing that it's right, knowing that, yeah, without relationships and people and trust and all these things, like, you don't have a company, you don't have customers, you don't have your staff, right? But what happens is that it kind of runs on autopilot, and it doesn't get and when I say it, I'm saying community, like the ideas of how community can actually drive growth, and you can measure that. It's 2026, and we can actually measure the impact of community on top line growth. We can actually measure community impact on retention, renewal of staff and customers in that way, right? But a lot of leaders don't know that. They don't know that. And a lot of, there's been a lot of great companies that have figured it out, but not at scale. And that's how I feel a lot of times when I get done having a conversation maybe with a leader who's like interested in community, and maybe they're on the fence, they're kind of skeptical, but they haven't made that jump. And if they just make that jump, or if the person talking to them about community can help reframe it and reposition it, then yeah, then they can start to take advantage of it. But I think community does sit dormant in a lot of organizations, or even worse, it sits siloed and it's just kind of there to check a box, and that's all it is. But if you look at the companies that, are making great products, they have great culture, and they're winning in the market, and they're making an impact in the world, those companies, they are not siloing community.
Wow.
They are spreading it across their ecosystem. They're spreading it across
Wow.
their their
Hold the thoughts
experience.
there. Hold the thoughts there, Chris.
Yeah. So yeah. So I love the way you, I love the way you said that.
You you
That's a
you make a
really
very
great way.
critical point there. I'm talking about communities staying dormant or communities working in silos. We're going to revisit that. But before we get to that, you make the argument that community, not AI, not better data or better infrastructure pipelines is the primary competitive differentiator for organizations navigating uncertainty. That is a really serious position, and you talk about the evidence to this. And in your view, if you look at companies like Lego, companies like Airbnb, companies like Microsoft, what do they have in common operationally that organizations without strong community infrastructure do not?
Yeah, good, great question. Again, I think there's a couple things there. One of the things that I've seen and studied is that those companies that are taking community and making a competitive advantage, they have leadership buy-in. So they have that leader that understands that community is not just a nice to have. They understand that there's a deep-rooted belief, and then you take that belief and they've inserted it into their company strategy. And they have alignment across the leadership, like the C-suite, right? Or the founders or the operating group, right? In that way. Maybe they don't have complete alignment across everybody, but they have majority in that way. And they all agree that community, when it's not put in a specific area and just kept there, that it's spread across. So the first part is mindset. That's just good old fashioned mindset, leadership mindset, but it's a community driven mindset. It's a mindset that says, we're going to be authentic. We're going to engage our customers and our staff in a way that includes them in the decision making process. It says we're going to clearly communicate our purpose, and we're going to be emotionally intelligent, and we're going to show agility. We're going to be able to go, hey, we just got this feedback from our customers in the forums and it's kind of negative, but we're not going to shut it down. We're going to see it as an opportunity. So majority of the leaders, all those companies you mentioned, they're not perfect, but they get it. And they get it, meaning community means their competitive advantage is that they've taken that concept and they've spread it across a
Wow.
mindset. The second thing is that they've operationalized it. So they have a very specific system that they use. I call it the three E's. That's what I came up with because when I studied all these companies, they had three things that created shared value. And that shared value basically means that when we use community, how does community and the use of community, like online forums or events, things like that, like how does that impact product, you know, sales, customer success, support, all these parts of a company, right? How does that create shared value? So basically, what they do is that they have three elements. They evaluate it, and they think specifically where they're going to put it in their business, and then they enable their staff and their customers. And basically, what that means is that all those companies, Airbnb and the ones that you mentioned, they've taken this time to explain to their customers and well, explain to their staff why is community important to our company, and how do you, wherever role you have at the company, how do you take community and this online community that we create or the concept community and fit it into your role? And then everybody's bought in, not at just a top level, and it's not just a top down initiative. They then unlock this idea of networks and they unlock the idea of what I call the adapt model. And
Wow.
that's basically it's
Let's get into it. Just
so
hold the pause.
so that's like all those companies you mentioned, that's what they're doing. But the cool thing is, and the exciting part, and this is what I get excited about, is that whatever company you have, like if you're running a B2C or B2B or what, technology or consumer, whatever it is, all those companies that you just talked about, they're all in different sectors, right? They're in different hospitality, they're in tech or whatever it is. If you embed community into your business structure and do it intentionally and strategically, you have just made what I call a secret ingredient. That is the competitive advantage, and that makes you unique because no company out there can copy how community is embedded in your organization. Because
Yeah.
just like you and me, we're individuals. We're connecting right now, and that's what makes us unique as individuals. And I believe organizations are people. They're made up of people in that way. So yeah,
That's
exciting stuff.
That is quite exciting. And I really want you to go deep into the ADAPT framework. And you talk about ADAPT standing for authenticity, talking about direction, agility, purpose, trust. So I want you to walk us through the elements that most senior leaders systematically underinvest in. And what happens organizationally when that element is missing? Because from what you have explained, can either be a competitive advantage or it can lead to a company failing. So I wanted you to point that.
Yeah, the depth model came out of the 20 years of talking with leaders and then research for the book and looking and asking myself, is there something new way to lead? Is there a better way to lead? Or even building on the shoulders of giants, right? Like I'm a huge study and fan of servant leadership. And the way I look at the adapt model and community led, community first leadership model is that it's the evolution of that. Because now in 2026, and really for the last 20 years, we had access to digital, right? To networks, to online. And those companies that are out ahead, a lot of them have caught on to the fact that you can take the concepts of servant leadership, you can take the concepts of being open, authentic, and scale it in that way. So when we look through the adapt model, the first one is the ability to be authentic. So again, whatever that means for you as a leader individually, and this can be organizationally as well, but usually I use it in the context of you as a leader, you being authentic. And then the second one is D is decision. And that means co-created. That means making decisions together, just like a community does, right? Does everybody agree? And then agility. And that's the idea of like looking at this and going, okay, there's some emotions coming in. How am I going to respond to negative feedback? And, am I going to shut it down or what am I going to do? Am I going to see this opportunity to build a better relationship? And then P is purpose. And that's looking at, hey, everybody comes together for a reason. Is that what everybody wants? And is that clear? Like, here's why we exist as a company, as a community. What is our shared purpose? If it's to talk about the state of beauty, like Sephora did for so many years. It did really well. They brought everybody together along like, hey, beauty is important and in that aspect. And Lego, like creativity. Everybody agrees that's the purpose, right? And then T, the last part of adapt is T is trust. So all of these really, they stack on each other essentially. When you get down to trust, trust is built up over time. Trust is built up over a long period of time. And it really kind of flies in the opposite direction of what a lot of leaders think is that you can microwave community. Like you want to make dinner, right? I just want to get it quick and put it in for a minute 30 seconds and out comes, right? Probably it'll feed you, but it's not going to be as good as a nice 5-star Michelin fine meal. So trust is this important thing that you've built over time, and you've shown that what you say in the community is what you do. And that's what Lego did. Lego admitted that they were not listening to their fans when they were near bankruptcy, $800 million in debt. Their leader goes on this adult fans of Lego forum, puts a post in there. I love looking at this forum. You can still go back and look at it. It's a great post. And I think it's essential for a lot of leaders to kind of get what this trust thing means. That they admitted that they weren't listening, then they committed to listening. And then they didn't just do that over like a quarter, right? Because a lot of leaders will look at community and go, well, how's the ROI at the end of the quarter? Is this thing showing ROI, right? At 6 months. If it's not, to get rid of it. And that's like the wrong thing to do. Lego, what they did over a 7 to 10 year period, they built up a relationship. They came back to that community. They said, hey, let's involve you in our products. Let's involve you with this. Let's not just go to our toy. Like so all of these different parts of the elements are built up over a period of time. But that's the model. That's what adapt is. And then trust is probably one of the most important things. And it's a hot topic today. I think there's a lot of things that companies are trying to figure out AI, and but also people are like, well, can I trust that AI? You know, is it real?
Mhm.
Is it human? Are they just trying to market to me? Like all of those questions
Yeah,
get at the idea of trust. Like,
that's
can
right.
I trust you as a company? Can I trust you as a leader, as a staff member? Like that's important. And one of the ways you can show trust is through community over a period of time and time again. So that's why I get excited, because we're living in a day and an age where
Wow.
companies have an amazing opportunity to kind of use community to counterbalance some of this AI stuff that we're all experiencing together, whether you're a customer environment or a staff environment as an employee. So leaders have this amazing ability now to go, hey, we can use AI in a right way for efficiency and to scale knowledge. That's great, but let's not do it at the expense of trust. And that's where it's the opportunity that I think we have as leaders to transform and almost stand out. Again, we can dive into the competitive
Thank you.
advantage, but that's the idea.
Thanks, Chris. That's powerful, powerful. And you talk about the 3E system. So most organizations that I've encountered, maybe if you look at systems, or when you look at most organizations, what in this 3Es, what do they skip? What does a community infrastructure looks like when all three are genuinely operational? And how does it make a leader feel? Because I want you to talk to us about three things quickly, if you may.
Yeah, no, I think there's probably two of the E's that are most commonly misunderstood, because what everybody gets right usually is experience. They start like, okay, we'll put it in marketing. Makes sense. Like community marketing is good, community culture, good, community support, good. Like they go, okay, check the box, and it kind of sits there, right? The other E's that they start to kind of forget about or don't understand, the enablement piece. They don't understand that you need to train your staff, and you need to communicate. You need to connect all the dots of like why community, how does it fit into their role, and give the tools to do that. And you need to do that for your customers, your most powerful advocates. You need to give them tools on how to scale your community, and you need to show them over and over again how and why the community is important to them as a customer. So I see a lot of leaders in organizations forget about enablement. And they just think that, oh, we're all human. Like, and we're automatically know how community fits into my role or my role as a customer. They just kind of assume that. And we all know what assuming does, right? In that way. So and then and then on the other side is evaluation. So that basically means making sure that you're measuring community. You're looking at how does community impact the top line growth revenue, and how does community help you save costs. That. And then what I see a lot of leaders do is that they mistake ROI for value, and they mistake the time frame that it takes to have a community show value over time. Again, I go back to the Lego example because it's a great example of long-term lifetime value. And what a lot of leaders do is they look at community and they go, "Oh, it's soft. It's kind of like a squishy thing. You can't really measure it. It's just feels and vibes." And I go, "No, it's not." Like, we actually have when you take your community data, how many times people log in, how many times do they visit, answered questions, all the data. We have so much data in online community platforms. Taking that data and connecting it with your CRM, connecting it with your surveys, and putting it together with that. And then the other part that they forget to do is tell stories. They forget to extract the great moments out of this community they just started and tell the stories and share them.
Wow.
So when you do all three, and again, that's what if you look at a Figma, you look at UiPath, again, Lego, great example again. They've done all of those three in that way. And then you can the way I look at the three E's is that it's like a Venn diagram. So in the middle of those three E's is shared value. So for example, if you're trying to convince somebody, another leader, that the community is valuable, you can't do it if you don't show how it impacted the bottom line. And that's E, that's evaluation, right? So so you're kind of looking at Lego and they go, well, yeah, eventually they measured it, right? They didn't do that at first, but those are the two areas that leaders usually forget about community and they're not creating the shared value is they don't measure it. They don't think they can measure it, or they don't need to measure it, or they're not enabling their staff and they're not enabling their customers in that way. So
Wow.
and there's a lot of great examples today of, like, how to do that. So it's not like they're not, like, trying to figure this stuff out for the first time. It's more about becoming aware of these models and following the great examples of companies that have gone before us and sitting down and figuring out where in your organization as a leader are you going to prioritize that? Because that's the other thing. I'll stop here with this is the prioritization. So with leaders understanding they don't necessarily always have to engage directly in the community, but they do at least have to prioritize the resources and the people and the hiring to run on the community. So it's the prioritization as well. The leaders aren't going to prioritize something if they don't see value. And if you don't measure something, how do you know it's valuable?
Let's talk about AI. AI is accelerating the pace of change inside all organizations across sectors at a rate that um, most leaders are finding it hard to even process. Most leaders are responding by trying to move faster, and you are arguing that the answer actually it's a different operating model, one where the sensing and the interpretation function is distributed rather than centralized. So the question is, what does this model look like, and what does a leader have to give up to build it?
Yeah, I think we're in a very both interesting and confusing yet exciting time with AI, right? I think I'm probably of the belief that AI can do amazing things for us. Like I love that. I use it every day for for the most part,
Yep.
but I'm cautious of it. I'm careful with it. And when it comes to how companies can use I think it's very important to not take the humanity out of the experience. What I mean by that is that when you're AI first, a lot of customers that I talk to and a lot of leaders that are, not buying into AI first, is essentially looking at it and going, well, what does that mean for the human experience? What does that mean for trust again? Like, what does that mean? Because we've all had experiences with bots. We've all had experiences in, authenticity. And the thing we have to still remember is that we are still living in a loneliness epidemic. Like, that is still documented since 2017 worldwide, a loneliness epidemic. people are still not connected to enough to each other, even to ourselves in that sense. So when you think about AI, it's great, but it's also something that we have to be careful about. And what I mean by that is that you can use community in your organization as a way to counterbalance some of the distrust that people might have. Because we were already distrustful of brands as customers. Customers have always been distrustful for a long time. And now you have this other layer, of AI, and we're all asking that. So it's important for companies to develop, their customer experience, thinking that, well, if we have AI, like, is that still, are we still connecting our customers together, like in that way? And a lot of the companies that we've been talking about, they have communities that can counterbalance that. Because the other thing is that it's not good to completely, like, not use AI, because I don't think that's an option. It's here to stay, just like the internet was like 20,
Yep.
30 years ago, right? Everybody's like, "Oh, no one's ever gonna give up their credit card online," right? Remember those days? Like, and it feels very similar to those days right now where we're like, "What is this AI stuff?" We're all trying to figure it out, and everybody's running crazy trying to figure things out. But if you have community and you're building community, meaning an online network where your customers connect with each other and you're facilitating that, you can have AI in your customer experience, but then also you're intentionally building community with them, meaning you're creating a space for customers to talk to each other. And as a leader, you're you're taking advantage of the good things of AI, which is the automations and things like that. And I hope a lot of leaders are being thoughtful about all that, because a lot of this is still new.
Yep.
And the cost of AI versus the cost of a human being, or cost of a worker, I think is still being sorted out in that way. What I know for sure is that community can be a counterbalance to AI, and it can be a competitive advantage when company might be swinging too far over to AI. And you may not know, because trust doesn't, like, go away quickly necessarily. Sometimes it can be broken really fast, right? Build up over time, and all it takes is one time, and bam, you're like, nobody trusts you anymore. But the other thing with trust is that it can erode over time, over death by a thousand cuts, as they say with
Just
that.
hold the thoughts there on trust, because I want you to go deeper
Oh,
into the
yeah, yeah.
trust question. Because when you look globally, you could see that trust is declining across
Mm,
institutions far more than it was maybe if you look back a decade ago or 2 decades ago. And whatever data you actually looking at globally, you would see that it's pointing in the same direction of talking about a decline in trust globally.
mhm.
So most organizations treat this decline in trust as a communication problem. But you treat it as a structural problem. The question is, what is the structural source of trust collapse inside organizations? And what is the structural kind of intervention that can rebuild trust? Because while you argue that trust decline is due to a structural problem, people are treating it's like given a different medication for a different diagnosis. People are treating it as a communication problem, but you argue that it is trust, and I want it is structural. So I want you to speak to that.
Yeah, yeah, the structural piece is really about the idea that any company you can think about is built on, we're talking about structure, and sound structures are built on things, or they're made of things that connect one things to each other, right? And that's what communities do. It's infrastructure. It's a way to build connections between people. Because if you think of the human body, right? The human body isn't as strong as it is without the skeletal system, and the skeletal system is held together in the muscles by connective tissue. So that's what community is. If you think about enabling your customers to talk to each other. And that's the part that a lot of companies forget, is that they have the opportunity to facilitate trust, not just create it. And that's the part that I see a lot of leaders um, go past. They kind of forget about that, or they miss that, is that it doesn't always have to be about you as the leader. It's about customer 1 and customer 2, like, and all the other customers, like, bringing them together. And if you do that at scale, that's the connective tissue. Like, that's the infrastructure.
Wow.
Because you think about hundreds of thousands of customers talking to each other about their experiences, and then the brand of the leader has facilitated that. It's just like, you always go to the person who throws the greatest parties, right?
Wow.
Like, I wanna go to that person's house because they're a great host, right? I wanna walk into their house because I know when I go there, I'm gonna meet somebody who's really great, and that host is gonna introduce me to this person and this person. We're have a great time, right? So it's kinda like that, right? But I think I call it infrastructure, and I think it's rightly called that because that all of that is built on that. And if you just try to look at it as a communication problem, you're just broadcasting. You're just sending a message, and it's just a message, and it's just a message. As opposed to having that same message come through the lens of a conversation, of a relationship. Like what you and I are doing right now, right? You and I we're having a chat, we're just talking, right? And people are listening to the conversation. They're like, "Oh yeah, I think that's," and so that's the idea. That's what happens in online communities. Somebody comes to the community with a problem about a product, or somebody comes to the internal staff forum and goes, "Hey, I just joined the company. I'm trying to find my whatever it is. Where's the cafe menu at?" Or one customer comes in and says, "I'm struggling with this application. Does anybody help me?" And they get 50 answers to the questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
That's that's better, right?
That's
But it's not the only thing that happens, right? However customers wanna solve problems, but that's why I call it the, structural, because if you step back and look at all of those positive connections happening in the experience of a customer, that builds up over time,
wow.
and that's what stacks, right? Like, if you look at, anything that gets built, buildings that get built, right? It's like built layer upon layer in the structure. And again, I love the human body as an example because it has like, you have bones and structure and muscles and tissue and brains and hearts. Like,
Yeah.
that is a business.
Wow.
Like, that is a community. That is community working together, right? In that way. But it's the idea of that a leader should facilitate that. It doesn't have to be about the leader. But actually, the better communities don't have one single person. Like, granted, Apple was all about Steve Jobs, for a while, but over time, they created an excitement around that. They were excited about the product, and same thing with Lego. You can't point to any one person who, like, represents Lego, right?
That's right.
It's about the people. Like,
Mhm.
that's what they've done. But that took years,
Wow. Wow.
to do
That's
that.
powerful, Chris.
But anyways, that's why I love that question. You got me going.
No, thank you.
I got one.
You have been the head of community for a geospatial intelligence company for years, and while doing that, you were simultaneously writing a book about community as organizational infrastructure, as you put it. So, what did you learn about organizational sensing from working inside organizations whose entire product is about sensing? And what did you learn more accurately that helped you to write your book or to hold the viewpoints and the research that you've done at this point and the frameworks that you've come up with?
Wow, that could be a whole 'nother podcast, episode.
Yeah, no, if you can
I love
summarize that in 2 minutes and get it.
Yeah, no. Well, you could just read the book, I guess, too, in that sense. But no, seriously though, I think it's for me, what I've learned is that there is there's a beginning that a that elite that companies can have, to create this environment, right? And when it comes down to it, comes down to, to people and prioritizations, and what do you want to do with your company, right? I think that's the part, right? And that's what gets me excited about that. Because when I was a music journalist, and I was writing about the concert experience, and the whole reason I got into all this leadership and community led leadership and things like that was because I had a connection at a concert, and I was dealing with a lot in my life at that time with my dad and my family and things like that. I went to a concert. I was a huge concert fan, and I felt connection and belonging in that moment. And then, you know, that grew. I created a concert fan community. And then I understood, and I had a couple of moments where I wanted to be able to take what I was feeling in that moment and bring it into an organization. And I've done that for many different organizations. And what I find is that it's very important for an organization to have this ability to facilitate community in that way. I think working with leaders, they all have different ways of thinking about community. They all have different ways of figuring out um, what community is, and why they figure and why it's important to them, how it fits into it. But the thing that I've learned the most is that you have to explain community in a way that makes sense to leaders, because the community, or a business, it's making money or saving money, right? Um, but it's also more than that. There's an opportunity to not only change who you are as a leader in your mind, you can change your organization, right? And with community then done right, you can change the market, and you can lead in the market. And then the next level from that is being able to change the world. And I think, and I've interacted. I've sat across the table. I've sat in boardrooms, with leaders who get excited about that, and they go, "Wow, okay, this is not just some feel good kumbaya um, thing that is unmeasurable. If we do this right, and we do it at scale over a period of time, and we want to build trust with our customers in our own unique way, like, we can go do that, and it's going to be beneficial to the business, like, in that way. So I think that's something that I've always wanted to do. And over the last 20 years, I've had the privilege of working with leaders and working for companies that get that.
Wow.
And and a credit to the leaders who get it, right? Because there's a lot at stake. Leaders are under tremendous amount of pressure, and I get that. We all get that. Leading is not easy.
Yep.
It's probably one of the hardest things to do that you'll ever do, especially leading a company.
Mm.
You have to make decisions that nobody else has to make, like, in that way. So, like, I I seriously honor and respect a lot of the leaders who double down on community,
That's right.
because it's not easy.
Mm.
You have to look at your peers across the C-suite or wherever you're in, and go, "I believe in this,"
That's right.
because a lot of them won't.
Mm.
But that's what those leaders at Lego did. Not everybody at Lego believed in
Mm.
community. They didn't. They were like, "This is crazy. We have to stick with what we already know. That's what's gonna get us out of that," right? And they didn't.
Yep.
So I've gained tremendous respect for the leaders who were courageous and turned into community champions. They were skeptics, or maybe they were on the fence, and they got just enough a taste of it with a positive customer experience, and they became courageous. And I think those leaders get rewarded, as well, for that. They get rewarded with, obviously, a successful company, but they get rewarded with the satisfaction that they not only made a great company, great product, but they made the world better. In
Wow.
that, and then in that way, and that's where I go, wow, okay, that's what it looks like. But it takes a lot of hard work
That's right.
to do it. Just like relationships, right? When you're married, or when you're raising kids, like, it's a long-term game, right? It's a long-term game. That's the same thing with community. But the reward, I would never, I wouldn't trade it for anything. And I don't think those leaders who had built communities and said yes to community when everybody was saying no, none of them have gone back to me and said, "Oh, Chris, I wish I wouldn't have never done community." Like, I've never had that conversation before
Wow.
with that. Maybe they cut it off, but they cut it off because they didn't. they didn't understand, or they gave into some of the pressure, like in that way. But we're here talking about leadership today and like where it needs to be.
Wow.
So I think those are the things. And as far as you asked about geospatial company.
No, I think I was asking about the lessons you learned
Oh, the lessons. Okay.
working there, and I think you've actually talked to those. But let me speak to some of the leaders that listen to our podcast,
Hmm.
that might be listening right now. And their organization, it's really at the point of AI driven pressure. um, Trust is declining in their organization and their teams, and they cannot tell whether their people are aligned or they are just kind of compliant with what they need to comply with in this AI era. I'd like you to kind of look at that kind of a scenario and give them a diagnostic, three specific signals that you can tell a leader that their organization has a sensing and alignment problem, not a strategy or a talent problem.
Wow. Yeah. Great question. I actually have a tool that I use for leaders. They can grab. We can talk about that later. But I think the things you want to look for is that do you have as a leader, because your company reflects your leadership mandate, right? Your leadership culture.
Mm.
Like, there's no way about that. Any company I've worked for, I worked with, like that you're and the other thing that I say is that if you're gonna start a community, leaders need to be prepared because that community is not gonna change that culture. It's gonna reflect it first.
That's
So, you have to ask yourself as a leader, am I leading in a community-driven mindset? Like, with that? Because that's the first part. Because if you aren't, then odds are your culture is not reflecting that. And then are there any other leaders at your company that are leading with authenticity? Are there any other leaders that are being open and honest with feedback with customers and with staff? Do you have any avenues or channels or networks within your company that allow for the the information to flow, right? Because I've worked for, I think all of us have worked for companies that when in at one time or another, where there wasn't an opportunity to share your feedback. There was an opportunity to connect with other customer or with other staff, like in that way, right? So do you have existing networks already created? And then the second thing is that you can ask employees, you can ask your customers,
right.
like in that way, and they'll tell you. I would just be ready for the answers for that, because because
That's
that's where a lot of leaders they get tripped up
wow.
with that. I've brought many a forum post or many a feedback to leaders and say, here's what we're hearing, and
Wow.
those leaders who that come out on top as far as like, in an authentic way, they've gone and seen that feedback, that negative feedback as an opportunity
One.
to build trust. So the first part, yeah, is check yourself, like how do you lead? Then look across your organization. Are there any, just this can be like a quick audit, can be a quick note to your staff, like, do we have anything that opens up communication between our customers and our staff? Like, do we have anything like that, in that way? Because if you do, great, build it. Like, is it resources? Is it funded? It's just run by an intern, because it shouldn't be. Your community should not be run by an intern. It should be funded and staffed
Yes.
and everything like that, right? So I think those are the diagnostics, that you'd want to look at. And and then the other thing, and this is usually a good way to do it too, is look across your competitors.
Wow. Wow.
What kind of communities are they already building? Because if chances are they already are building community. We're in 2026, and communities kind of, especially during COVID, it was a very hot topic. And then I saw a lot of organizations kind of go back to legacy mindsets, old ways of thinking,
Yeah.
and forget about what we learned during COVID, meaning connection, online networks, things like that, scaling all that stuff, and we kind of went back to this kind of pre-COVID mindset, like in a way. But I think that looking at your competition
Yeah.
is a great way, and all it takes is a simple web search. Take your take your top 5 competitors and put community in the search. Go ask ChatGPT, go ask Claude,
Wow.
is my competition already building community?
Wow.
And just see what it says.
Wow. That's so
'Cause that's a good motivator. Because either your staff is gonna wanna go work for somebody, who has community, or your customers are gonna wanna go to someplace where they're doing it. Because at the end of the day, we are still in a loneliness epidemic. We still have these desire to connect as a customer, as people with people, and so important to build that into our product experiences, to our staff and employee experiences, because that's what people are craving. We all want that. So those are the things. So I think those are some things that I would do. I would
wow.
encourage
Thanks.
leaders to do.
Thank you, Chris, for those very important points that you made there. And I hope someone out there is really listening to. And we're going to be sharing more details about Chris's books and other things and how you can reach Chris. So, the name of this podcast is called Clarity Mandate. And I believe that clarity stopped being optional at a certain point. The gap between a leadership who actually has clarity and the leadership who fails, um, it's actually not just a knowledge gap. And you've spent 20 years plus inside organizations that have organizational clarity. Question to you is, what is actually um, the thing that you have learned that leaders listening to us now and don't have the clarity on this perspective of building structure, building community? Um, what is it that all these years have brought clarity to you that you could share in a sentence or two? That if you have clarity in this area when it comes to building community or sensing right within your organization, this is what I've learned and this is what you could take to your organization.
Yeah, wow. I love that, I love that question. I think the one thing that I would do is that if you're wondering if community is important and worth investing in, the answer is yes. And I think that's the easy part. The hard part is committing to it long term and not giving into old muscle memory, old ways of thinking, because they will come back. But I think that it's important to see that community, you cannot microwave it. It is important to see that it's like a fine meal, that it takes time, intention, and dedication, and it's a long, long game, but very extremely rewarding. If we haven't made that clear yet, with these companies we've been talking about, like they played the long game. So I think that is important, and it should be a part of every company's strategy at this point in 2026 and beyond. Um, Given what's happening with AI, given what's happening with the loneliness epidemic, given what's happening with trust and trust erosion, all these things like relationships, all these things, why would you not want to have community embedded into your business strategy, both for your customers and for your staff, like in that way? And even I'll leave it. I'll end the question or answer with this: is that we have science now. We have neuroscience, trust. One of my friends, Dr. Paul Zak, as a neuroscientist, studied this immensely, and I talk about it in the book about how we can actually look at a molecular level that when we build community, that builds trust, like in our blood, like in our minds, like when we when you and I are talking here, when we're looking at each other, when that happens online, I did a whole series of experiments on myself with this tracker. Like, does online community build trust actually at a molecular level? Yes. Like, we have science now that shows that.
Wow.
So we have data you can use to back up the C-suite claim for community. So I'm just saying that there's no reason why a leader would not want to build into it. The hard part is figuring out how. Like, we shouldn't be answering why anymore or if with community. We should be figuring out how. Like, that's the message. Like,
Wow.
we have enough data to go, yes, this is really good for business. Now it's just the challenge of figuring out, how do we get it into our business structure? What does it mean for us as a tech company, as a product company, as an engineering, whatever kind of company you have, or how, whatever kind of leader you are, how do you fit community? It's not where they're like, is community valuable? I don't know. It's like, we should move beyond that. We should be now figuring out how. Like,
Wow,
that's the part. That's the
that's
clarity.
powerful. That's so
No.
powerful the way you put it there. I mean, the question, as you heard, Chris, with over 20 years experience in looking at building communities and the value and the infrastructure and how it helped companies that have done it right. And he says, the question right now is not whether community is important. The question is, how do we build communities? And you can reach out to Chris and whoever else is helping you, but we'll put the details for Chris in the show notes. And here we go. Chris, any final thoughts you want to share with our listeners before we round up?
I've had this great,
And
great
how they can reach
conversation.
you. So any thoughts and how they can reach you?
Yeah, yeah, no, I love helping leaders, doing workshops or coming to speak to their teams in that way. There's actually a diagnostic that anybody can take. It's called the Community First Readiness Diagnostic. So if you've been listening to the conversation and you're wondering, like, where do I stand? How do I do community? Like, where's my community? So you can go to my website at chriscatania.co slash diagnostic and get a free diagnostic. And then you get that little readiness score that will kind of give you an idea of like where you stand, both on the adapt model and also on the 3E model. So that's a great first step for people who have been listening and want to go a little deeper.
Wow, thank you very much. Thanks. This is Chris Catania, community strategist, leadership architect, and one of the most clearest system thinkers that I've encountered on my podcast on the question of how organizations are actually sensing and how they respond to change in the real world that we are in. And your book makes the case that community is not a nice to have, that it is the operating infrastructure of every organization that adapts faster than its competitors. And in an AI accelerated world that we are in right now, the speed of adaptation, it's only sustainable. The speed of getting your organization have that kind of infrastructure, that is the only thing that gives you the kind of sustainable competitive advantage. And you heard Chris, and you can check out in the show notes details to his website, to the frameworks that he's talking about, do the audits that he's saying. You want to reach out to him. And if you're a leader listening out there and you want to check, are your people aligned? Is your organization sensing clearly? And are they compliant? Are they just flying blind speed in this AI era? And the mandate is clear. And now it's yours to go out there and execute. If you need help, you want to reach out to Chris. You want to find out his website. You want to look at the Community First Advantage book that Chris wrote, a wonderful book available on Amazon and other sources. So I've been the host here, Dr. Dr. Vivian Atud, and this is the Clarity Mandate. I will see you and talk to you in the next episode.